This is the Grant Caldwell Report, and we begin with a developing case that is drawing growing concern from law enforcement and the public alike. Authorities now say the search for Nancy Guthrie may take months or even years, a stark assessment that underscores just how complex this investigation has become. In the next 60 seconds, I'm going to walk you through exactly what is confirmed, what is being claimed, and the one detail most coverage is skipping that changes how this unfolds. Stay with me because once you see how these pieces connect, the entire situation looks very different. Here's what we know at this hour. Nancy Guthrie was reported missing in Pima County, Arizona. Multiple agencies are involved. Search activity has expanded beyond an initial perimeter, and officials have publicly acknowledged that the case presents unusual challenges, ranging from terrain to the timeline itself. According to statements attributed to local law enforcement, the investigation remains active, but there is no definitive time frame for resolution. That uncertainty matters. When authorities begin preparing the public for a search measured in months or years, it typically signals one of two realities. Either there is limited actionable information, or the available leads require painstaking verification. In cases like this, progress is often incremental, not dramatic, and that has implications for expectations, resources, and accountability. Now, to be clear, officials have not released evidence pointing to a single confirmed outcome. There has been no official declaration of criminal charges tied directly to the disappearance, and investigators have emphasized that multiple scenarios remain under review. Reports from national and regional outlets indicate continued law enforcement activity, including search operations and investigative steps, but much of the case remains shielded from public view. What's being claimed, by neighbors, by unnamed sources, and in early media reporting, must be handled carefully. Law enforcement has cautioned against speculation, and so will we. At the same time, officials have acknowledged that the scope of the investigation may expand as new information is assessed. The deeper question, and the one we'll return to throughout this report, is accountability. How decisions are being made, how information is being shared, and why officials are already signaling a long road ahead. That framing alone tells us this is not a routine missing person case. We'll separate verified facts from allegations, examine what authorities are saying and not saying, and outline what to watch next as this investigation continues. When law enforcement begins using phrases like months or years, that language is not accidental. It's deliberate, and it usually reflects what investigators are seeing behind the scenes. In cases like the Nancy Guthrie disappearance, a prolonged timeline often points to a combination of factors rather than a single obstacle. One of those factors is information density, how much verified, actionable data investigators actually have. When early evidence is limited or fragmented, every lead must be tested carefully, and that process takes time. Another factor is environmental complexity. Officials have acknowledged that terrain and geographic scope complicate search efforts. Expanding a search area increases the burden on personnel and resources, and it forces investigators to prioritize methodical coverage over speed. That's especially true when searches move beyond urban settings or clear boundaries. There's also the issue of timeline reconstruction. Establishing where someone was, who they interacted with, and when key moments occurred requires corroboration from multiple sources, records, witnesses, and sometimes digital data. If those elements don't align cleanly, investigators have to slow down to avoid errors that could compromise the case later. What's important to understand is that a longer projected timeline does not mean the case has stalled. It often means the opposite, that investigators are being cautious, building a foundation that can support formal action if and when it becomes appropriate. Rushing conclusions can collapse cases, especially if charges or warrants eventually come into play. Officials have also been careful about public messaging. By setting expectations early, they reduce pressure to produce dramatic updates that may not exist yet. That restraint protects both the investigation and any future legal proceedings. At the same time, a long timeline raises legitimate questions about transparency and oversight. How often will updates be provided? What benchmarks signal progress? And how will agencies coordinate as the investigation evolves? Those questions don't imply failure. They reflect public interest in accountability during an extended process. And they're questions investigators know they'll eventually have to answer. The key takeaway from this section is simple. When authorities say a search could take months or years, it's a signal of complexity, not closure. The case remains active, open-ended, and dependent on careful, step-by-step verification. As public attention grows around the Nancy Guthrie case, the gap between what is confirmed and what is being assumed is widening, and that's where confusion and misinformation tend to take hold. Let's start with what is confirmed. Nancy Guthrie has been reported missing and the investigation remains active. Multiple law enforcement agencies are involved. Search efforts have expanded, and officials have publicly acknowledged that the case presents unusual challenges. Authorities have also stated that there is no definitive timeline for resolution and that the search could take months or longer. Those are facts on the record. Now here's what is not confirmed. There has been no official statement declaring a specific cause, no publicly named suspects, and no announcement of charges directly tied to her disappearance. While reports have referenced investigative activity, and in some cases, detentions related to the broader inquiry, law enforcement has not equated those actions with conclusions about responsibility. That distinction matters. Detention, questioning, or investigative focus does not automatically indicate guilt. These are procedural steps used to verify information, eliminate possibilities, and protect the integrity of the case. Jumping from investigative action to final outcome is where assumptions take over. Another area where assumptions are forming is intent. Some commentary online suggests authorities already know what happened, but are withholding information. There is no evidence supporting that claim. In many complex cases, investigators genuinely do not have enough verified information early on to draw firm conclusions, and acknowledging that uncertainty is often more responsible than projecting confidence that doesn't exist. It's also important to recognize what officials are not doing. They are not closing the case, they are not reducing resources, and they are not signaling resolution. Instead, their language suggests continued work, careful verification, and an awareness of legal thresholds that must be met before any formal action is taken. For viewers, the discipline here is restraint. Following developments means tracking official statements, documented actions, and legal filings, not speculation or anonymous claims. The absence of dramatic updates does not mean inactivity. It often means the opposite. As this case moves forward, the most meaningful changes will come in the form of concrete steps, warrants, charges, recoveries, or formal conclusions. Until then, separating fact from assumption is not just good journalism, it's essential to understanding what's actually happening. As we close, here's what actually matters moving forward. Not speculation, not viral theories, but signals that indicate real progress in the Nancy Guthrie investigation. The next meaningful developments will not come through anonymous claims or social media chatter. They will come through formal action. That means documented warrants, publicly acknowledged charges, recoveries, or official statements that materially change the legal posture of the case. Until one of those things happens, the investigation remains exactly what authorities have described it as: active, complex, and unresolved. When officials say a search could take months or even years, they are setting expectations for a process built on verification, not speed. That doesn't mean answers won't come. It means they will only come when evidence supports them. In cases like this, restraint is not a lack of urgency. It's a safeguard against error. For the public, the responsibility now is patience paired with attention. Watch for changes in language from law enforcement. Watch for the transition from investigative activity to legal filings. Watch for coordination between agencies that signals movement beyond search into resolution. And just as importantly, be wary of anyone claiming certainty where none has been established. Complex cases don't resolve through guesses. They resolve through facts that can withstand scrutiny in court, not just in headlines. This case remains open. The search continues. And accountability, when it comes, will come through process, not pressure. This is the Grant Caldwell Report. We don't rush conclusions. We don't trade accuracy for attention, and we stay with the story until the facts are confirmed. If you want responsible updates as this investigation develops, like this video, subscribe and turn notifications on. When there is verified information, we will bring it to you, clearly, carefully, and without speculation. We'll continue to follow this case.